Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Josh Taylor with us, but we got to talk about the big situation with Cameron Sutton signing with the Steelers, not just the impact he has on the field, but what happened off the field and the moral questions that come with Cam Sutton returning to the team. That and more here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Josh Taylor. He back in the building. You can see him on KDKA TV. You can listen to him on 93.7. You can hear him everywhere. He is doing stuff all the time. Josh, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. We're past June 1st because if you
Yes.
think about like all the different points of the league year, where you get to that June 1st designation, and you know how that does for contracts and the cap years between 2024 and 2025. Now we're to that point. It's that last little flurry of activity, mini camps going on over here. Before you know it, you and I talked about this before. We're gonna blink and it'll be training camp. Like we're almost there. We're what, 7-8 weeks away, 8 or 9 weeks. We're gonna blink. Training camp will be here, and we'll be out in 80 and 90 degree weather, sweating our tails off, wishing we were someplace cool and not as ridiculous. So yeah, we're getting to that point.
And look, it's already getting hot. It's already getting humid. It's we getting there anyways.
I'm sweating in my office already.
Yeah, I'm sweating here too. Well, I got the AC off while I record. But let's dive into the big news that was Wednesday, and that was that the Steelers signed Cam Sutton. Now, Cam Sutton, of course, was with the Steelers just 2 years ago. Was signed for big money to the Detroit Lions in free agency. Played for them for a year. We'll get into his play with the Lions in a sec here. But then had a domestic violence accusations, and charges put up against him in the spring. That led to him being released by the Lions. We'll get into the charges. We are going to spend a lot of time talking about that in this show, but I want to get to other things first. What was discussed when Cam Sutton spoke to us on Wednesday, because he did speak to the media, and I think there were some interesting things that he said, both about the situation and about on the field stuff. But after that, he was released. It took some time. He's been in contact with the team, and then they signed him, and then he was practicing. He practiced on Wednesday, and I put film on that on my Twitter account. So, Josh, without further ado, we're going to get into all the details surrounding Cam Sutton, but I wanted to just play the clip of Cam Sutton talking because, again, we're talking about these were serious domestic violence charges with things there, and it originally was a felony. It has been reduced to a misdemeanor, and he's in a pretrial diversion program. So at this point in time, he might not even be a convicted criminal when this is all said and done because of the pretrial diversion program. Again, we'll get into that in a bit, but I wanted to give a chance for everyone to hear from Cameron Sutton, what he does for the Steelers on the field and what he's dealt with off the field. Here's Sutton.
Cam, what's your message to fans who, maybe question a little bit what ultimately led you getting cut in Detroit?
It's an opinion-based world. Everybody kind of moves on the movement of not knowing, but feel the presence or feel the space to speak, so and that's give or take, however it goes. My job is not to appeal to someone else. My job is to be the best version of myself, and how do I give that off to the mass, or how do I give that off to everyone around me? I'm in full control of that, so I'm never worried about a narrative. I'm never worried about what necessarily people say, because obviously more than likely they don't know me more than anybody else, you know what I mean? And again, it gets back to just your foundation, your morals, who you are individually as a human being, and just what you stand on. Holding my head high, again, everybody goes through adversity. Everybody goes through things in their life that, can change it in both directions. So it's all about how you stand on that and what you do from that. So, and like I said, I'm ready to keep moving in the right direction. Everything else will keep falling in line, and we just keep moving from there. I'm enjoying. So
glad to be back.
Yes, sir. It's amazing to be back.
When did this first discussion start, Cam, about the possibility of coming back?
Just kind of early in the off season. Taking one day at a time. Seeing what's next for myself. Again, just letting the days playing out, and obviously just having a great relationship with the organization and coaches. Just checking in on my well-being, just making sure I'm okay, and then from a business standpoint, just seeing what the next opportunity will be, and kind of we're here now, and just ready to put my best foot forward.
It's one thing to get back, and it's another, I would imagine, to get back with the team that took you, and it's been 6 years.
Yeah, like I said, that's amazing, man. Came into a great foundation in this organization. It's still the same way to this day. The people, obviously the players, the continuity, just being back around this atmosphere, obviously, like I said, it's very heartfelt and, just lighthearted, really. Lighthearted situation. So I'm just here, man. I'm just here to be myself, get infused around the guys, and then just help the team win, any way you can.
Did you see any hurdles to get in conversations that you had with the Steelers leading after this with Mike and Omar? How do you kind of explain the situation that led to you being released by the Lions?
Yeah, well, like I said, I can't really speak on kind of that too much with the league or that stance, but with the team-wise, and again, just the connection-wise, to stay in contact. It was more of just general check-in, general wellness check-in, just make sure I'm fine, checking in my family, things like that. And then obviously opportunities lead to the next. The team was going through, draft and a lot of earlier seasonal things. And, I'm just staying on my end, just staying ready, staying in shape, running, training, doing those things on a day-to-day basis. And just ready for a call, So obviously that call is, presenting itself, and I'm here now. And just ready to keep moving.
What are your expectations from a role on the team?
No expectation. Come in here and grind. Come here and do everything, that I can to give myself opportunities. We're all about competitiveness. So keep bringing that nature, keep challenging guys. Other guys have obviously been in camp so far. So understand and make sure they understand the defense. I'm kind of necessarily on the back end of that because just a little turnover, but. For the most, still kind of the same with scheme-wise and things like that. So just getting that carryover with everything and really just, like I said, just getting around the guys. We got a lot of new faces, especially in the back end. So we're all about being on the same string out there on the field, making sure our communication is good across the board, make sure we're not giving up plays before a play even start. And then obviously just come out here with high energy every day. Everybody, that's contagious, that's infectious. And I'm just ready to, like I said, continue to be that spirit, continue to be that light for these guys. And, like I said, just keep coming together.
Guys, two more.
Kim, what?
So a lot of things were said there, Josh. One, addressing the situation. First of all, he said he would not talk about the situation itself in detail. I think Jenna Harden did a great job asking a question about how fans should see things. And he talked about narratives and believing things that they don't know. And I want to get to the crux of that part, because I think the part of what we do not know and what people have assumed has shaped a lot of conversations around the Cam Sutton situation. But the things that we do know is what he brings to the table as a defender, Josh. And this is a guy who just 2 years ago for the Steelers had 3 interceptions, was a very good producer for the team, both in the slot and outside cornerback. He was extremely versatile, and he brought that to the table. That certainly helped things out. Now, with the Lions, it did not go well for him. He gave up, according to Pro Football Focus, he gave up 8 touchdowns, only had 1 interception, 7 passes broken up. But quarterbacks who targeted him had a passer rating of 122. That is way up from a passer rating of 69.6 when he was with the Steelers last year. Josh, is bringing back Cam Sutton the right thing for the Steelers on the field? We will get to the off the field stuff in a second here.
If you go back to last year and you had people asking the question of why they let him leave, then yeah, it probably is the right thing on the field, because there were quite a few people that did not want to see him go. And granted, there were a few of us that probably didn't want to see him go, but we also understood why he left, because Detroit offered him a good bit of money, and I doubt the Steelers probably would have been able to match that given their cap situation this time last year. So it wasn't that surprising, I think, if you understood the cap, machinations of it all. But I think we also understood the fact that, yeah, it would have been great to see him stick around. He just got a better offer. So from that perspective, yeah, I think it is the thing for them to do because it brings back a guy that they probably didn't want to lose at the very beginning when that decision came down, but it also brings them another veteran face back around because, of course, he left. They brought in Patrick Peterson, and Mike Tomlin talked about it to that effect at one point during the season. He said, basically, we brought Patrick Peterson in to be in that Cam Sutton role.
Yeah.
And now Patrick Peterson has moved on. Cam Sutton is back, so maybe now all's well that ends well from that particular perspective. But it does give them a veteran voice in that back half of the defense. It also gives them a veteran voice in that room, and it gives them a guy that they are familiar with and he's familiar with them. So there's a lot of chemistry that kind of re-enters the room, so to speak, as far as Cam Sutton being back.
I want to talk more about the case itself, the reason why he was cut from the Lions, because that is a very important topic to cover when we're covering this, and we want to be responsible about talking about this. We'll do that in a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. What's the first thing that you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? Maybe you go for a run, maybe you'd read a book, or maybe you'd be there for a friend. But what about just being there for yourself? That's where BetterHelp Therapy can come in, because therapy can help you find what matters most to you and help you organize your life so that you can do more of that. I benefited from the help of a good therapist in my life who's helped me sort out the most important things that I try to balance every single day. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows that life can be busy and stressful and that your schedule can be complicated. That's why BetterHelp is designed to be suitable to your schedule no matter how busy you are. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime that you choose for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, talking all things Steelers, especially on the Cam Sutton situation. So, Josh, let's detail how all of this began, right? This all stems back to I remember when I first learned about this, I was covering March Madness at PPG Paints Arena at the court there, and I saw this article pop up on ESPN. I said, Cameron Sutton? That Cameron Sutton? Didn't see this coming. But there were domestic violence charges levied against Sutton in the state of Florida. The charges were from an affidavit from a woman who was accusing him, and in those affidavits, I mean, the details seemed very, and not didn't seem, they were the details given in the affidavit. Which, if you don't know what an affidavit is, it is simply the information given to the court by a person that's presenting this information, aka his accuser. Filed this with the court, with the police, and that's where this information came from. So it is not a determined to have happened thing. It's basically an allegation, an accusation. And this is where, but the seriousness of it was that the allegation included that Cam Sutton supposedly slammed the person into a wall, bit her on the neck, left a quarter side abrasion that bled, that was bleeding, and grabbed her by the face and neck and choked her and caused her to briefly lose consciousness. And those are all very serious accusations that do need to be treated seriously. And what made this more complicated was after the fact, the police in Florida, in the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, they could not find Cameron Sutton. They said they went to his home and he wasn't there. They said he had multiple vehicles and he had not used them in the state of Florida. And then they said they called his phone, but his phone was off. So after, I think it was a period of 13 days from when they started their search for him, and they couldn't find him, they released a public report, and it was published to ESPN, and it was, hey, we can't find Cam Sutton. He's on the run. So we have been looking for him. We cannot find him. When that one goes out, the Lions see it. Cam Sutton was working out at the facility. They informed him. They told him, you should get counsel, figure something out. Cam Sutton was released the next day, and then 11 days after that, he turned himself in Florida to the police and peacefully. But since then, and this is where it also continues to add complications here. Since then, you've had the charges, which were originally felony charges that were brought up, be dropped down to misdemeanor charges, and now the judge has now put Cam Sutton in a pretrial diversion program. And for those who do not know, it's basically that is a situation where if you are accused of a crime, and especially domestic violence, you're going to go through classes, you're going to go through a process to learn things that the court wants you to learn to show that you aren't a danger to the community and to others and to yourself. And then if you pass all the things that are required of that diversion program, you do not get convicted of this, and that stays off your permanent record and everything. So I know I just described a lot of parts of the process here, Josh, but I think where a lot of people are getting hung up, because there's a lot of discussion about, well, if he did that, he can't be on the Steelers. With the serious accusations in that affidavit, if those things did happen and the court determined that was still, if they were still thinking that was what actually happened, I don't think Cam Sutton would be a free man right now, or he would be on remand, and he would not be dealing with a pretrial diversion program. Just in my estimation of it, I think there might have been some mitigating factors, some new evidence, something that came along that kind of slowed that down or lessened the impact of the initial affidavit. But Josh, it seems like there are a lot of people that are uncomfortable with the Steelers signing Cam Sutton, because the fact is we don't know what happened. We've asked Cam Sutton, he won't give answers. The family has asked for privacy. The charges have been lessened. There's not going to be a trial, so we will not learn. There's not even a settlement to talk about. So there's no details here. And I think that's the thing when people talk about this, whether you think that Cam Sutton is completely innocent of any wrongdoing, or you think that he's guilty and needs to never play football and needs to be locked up, we don't know all the details. We have an accusation from the affidavit. We have the facts that the affidavit was lessened, or that the charges were lessened, and that now he's in a program that is going to allow him to avoid conviction. And the Steelers have signed him after this. To me, I don't think the Steelers sign him if they have any inkling that this position situation could get worse for Cam Sutton.
This is the benefit of having a lawyer and a TV reporter and anchor on the same show, because we're going to give you a much different perspective than you're probably going to hear from the average person on the street. You hit on a whole bunch of things that I was probably going to say along those same lines. And for me, it's threefold. Number one, I agree with you. Just for what we hear from Hillsborough County, from that side of it, from the court side of it, and from the authority side of it, of those charges getting knocked down and the pretrial diversion program, I agree with you. You're not going through those things unless somebody truly believes that the situation isn't as serious as it once was. And it's not going to get, de-escalated to that level unless someone feels, A, it wasn't as serious as it was, or B, this is something that can be rectified rather quickly. So you and I agree on that. We also agree on the fact that if this were the case, I can't see the Steelers, especially when we heard reports that he was meeting with them before, or there had been conversations before.
Right.
I can't see them having that conversation with him and not doing their due diligence, or doing their due diligence and not finding what they were looking for, and then deciding to sign it. That just doesn't make sense to me. You and I have both been around this organization for a long time. We both know if that team wants to find something out, they're going to find out what they want to know.
And that is not to say that they haven't had players that have been troublemakers or done things that have been wrong, because they have. But those players it's been about keeping those players, not going out and signing those players. And I think there's a big difference there.
There is a big difference there, and it kind of gets to the third thing I was going to bring up. If you're one of those people that are reacting to what you're hearing, I'm wondering, are you new here? Because if you follow the history of this franchise the past handful of decades, not years, decades, you're bound to find something. One of those things, like you throw a rock, you'll hit something. That's one of those scenarios. You're going to find some stuff that's happening with players and even coaches in this organization that might not have been necessarily the most lawful things in the world, or most friendly things in the world. That's just one of those things that's not even an opinion for me or you.
Yeah.
That's documented fact. It's in black and white. It's on wax. So you don't need us to tell you a bunch of stories for you to just go and look it up and Google name and incident, and it'll probably pop up. And it's, these are certified things that we know happened. Now, I say all that to say this. I think Cam Sutton is handling it well from his end, because first of all, his counsel is probably telling him, do not say a word about anything, because you don't want to make it worse for yourself. That's the first thing. And of course, a lawyer I'm talking to should know that, of course, and you know that better than I do. But on top of that, you talked about this too. I had the same reaction you did when I saw a report that Cam Sutton's name was on, that he was wanted by authorities in Florida. Because I remember when he came out in the draft, between a couple of contacts I had, one in Knoxville, one in Nashville, and a couple other people that had just covered the SEC, on the whole, just from my time being down there a decade ago. They all told me the same thing when the Steelers drafted Cam Sutton. They're like, you're getting a good kid, high quality character guy, just really good dude that everybody in Knoxville and everybody that covered him just loved to be around. He was just a genuine guy. So I think we all had the same reaction. We're like, look, if there's anybody on this team that we expect that to happen to, Cam Sutton's not on that list. Or at least, former players or current players for that matter. So I think we all had the same reaction. But to jump into that pool of, well, clearly this happened, so if A happened, then you must go with B. We can't make that assertion right now because there are too many things that are happening. There are too many wheels that are still spinning before this vehicle comes to a stop for us to know exactly where it's resting and know exactly what's happening. And that's one of those things but it's part of being in that 24/7 news cycle world that we live in now, because word travels even faster than it did way back in the day. You know what I say? Like a live travel twice around before you put your pants on. Well, it might even be 4 or 5 times as fast as that now in this internet age. So, and by the time words travel, everybody's got an opinion on it. And it's one of those things where we can even say what we want to, we're blue in the face, but the thing that's going to matter, and there's no way around this, regardless of how you and I feel, the thing that's going to matter in the end is what the official record says in Pittsburgh County. That's what's going to matter. That's what's going to be on record, and that's what history is going to tell us moving forward. And whether or not Cam Sutton is a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers when that final, when that final designation comes down is irrelevant. But that's what we're going to look at when it's all said and done. And it feels kind of premature and it feels a little bit irresponsible to make it into something other than that before that time comes.
And then that's the thing, is being responsible at this conversation and trying to understand where things are. And again, I think I preface this with biggest thing here is we do not know a lot of details. And when people assume either way, that's when it gets dangerous. Like, for example, one of the biggest hangups and the things that people were saying, well, he definitely did it, was the fact that the police couldn't find him for 2 weeks. And then the story came out on ESPN, and then, he was cut from the Lions, and that didn't look good for Cam Sutton. And to me, I was like, yeah, that don't look good at all. But there's also the possibility, and this is also Cam Sutton in that first question that we played in the clip there, when he responded, he said, people are going to spin whatever narratives that they want, but without the actual information. We do not know if Cam Sutton actually avoided the police. It was only the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office that was looking for him in Florida, and he was in Detroit working out with the Lions. It's very positive. And they said we went to his house, he wasn't there. We checked the cars that he typically had, that he had registered in Florida, that he wasn't using them. We called the phone number that we had for him, and the phone was off. Now maybe he was. We cannot say either way. Like, that would be irresponsible for us to assume either way. But I can't discount the possibility that, let's say there was an incident where this whole allegation stemmed from, where there was some sort of physical conflict. Maybe it wasn't as serious as the affidavit claimed. Maybe it was, but either way, maybe after that he was just like, you know what, I'm distancing myself from this, and I'm going to focus on my job out on the northern part of the country, back in Detroit, and just have a distance. And I'm going to keep my phone on because I don't want to be bothered by that person. And it's very possible Cam Sutton just did not know that there was this thing out for him. It's also very possible that he did know and he was dodging. I'm not here to say either way, but I think it's irresponsible for people to just assume one way or the other, presume guilt, presume innocence. And again, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. I'm not saying that you should just deem him, but I'm saying, like, there are pieces of information that pose interesting questions that we can't answer because we don't have those facts, and that's where the situation is. But I do think that when you're considering the Steelers here, if you're the Steelers, it's different. Like when Ben Roethlisberger's accusations came out and he was the franchise quarterback on the team. It's different when James Harrison had allegations come out about his family and he was already on the team. Those weren't decisions about, hey, do you need to go out and sign this guy? Those were decisions, hey, like, do we need to cut this guy? And that's a very different question than, do you go out and sign this guy who you do know you have a relationship with Cam Sutton, but it's not but it's not the same as those. And also, I think for those people who might be saying, "Oh, the Steelers can't afford to get Cam," like you said, maybe you haven't been around the Steelers, but Ben Roethlisberger had multiple allegations put out there that were very serious, and the Steelers kept him the whole time. And yes, there were rumors that the Rooneys were ready to move on from him if things didn't start to clear up. But this has been something that follows not just the Steelers, but all the organizations. You look at what the Ravens went through with Ray Rice. You look at what the Browns are going through right now with Deshaun Watson. You look at, for the Bengals, Joe Mixon, or go back to the running back before him, Jeremy, what's his face? I forget his name. But he had Jeremy, yeah, exactly. Jeremy Hill. Most teams, if not all teams in the NFL, deal with stuff. Look at the Chiefs right now. They got a lot of accusations. I'm not even talking about Harrison Butker. Go look at like Isaiah Buggs, a former Steeler, and other guys that are getting in trouble right now for actual crimes and stuff. But I look at this situation and I say, I don't think the Steelers, I think that when they initially reached out and contacted him, it was probably part of the research that they were doing to say, hey, can we afford to bring this guy back? Because we cannot bring this guy back. And then he turns to be guilty. And this is a whole other problem and a distraction. They are trying to keep to have this season on the rise. And so after doing all that, I think the Steelers did their due diligence, found that what he was saying, that this was that the reasons behind the charges being lessened from a felony to a misdemeanor, have that there's weight to that, and they're saying, you know what, we can afford to bring him back. He's brought back on a vet minimum 1-year deal. It's a prove it thing for him. It cost the team nothing, I think that situation works out for the Steelers on the field very well. And I want to talk more about how it will work out on the field for the Steelers after this. But I wanted to spend a significant portion of this show going over the details that we know of the case and why this is different. Josh, did you have a point that you were wanting to get in there?
Yeah, I want to drop one more thing because I was talking about the history of this franchise the past, handful of decades. I'll just go back one decade just to give a good example of this team doing its due diligence, bringing in a player from the outside that had some issues with the law. Let's go back a decade. This team brought in a player who had not only been charged, had been arrested, had been tried and convicted, and served time in a federal institution. Then had been released and gotten back in the league. Then the Steelers brought him here. You can't tell me that they're not going through that entire process without doing some level of due diligence. So if they're willing to do that level of due diligence in that situation and find it suitable to bring in a player given all the circumstances I just laid out, I have no reason to believe they wouldn't do the same thing with Cam Sutton. And these are circumstances that are far, far more benign than what we're talking about here as far as the entire justice system and that process playing itself out. We're still in the early stages here with Cam Sutton, and we've seen the entire process play out in another spectrum as far as Mike Vick was concerned. And this team went through its entire process of due diligence and still saw fit to bring him here. So if they're willing to do that a decade ago, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and think they probably have figured out what they need to figure out regarding Cam Sutton.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get back to Cam Sutton's impact on the field, what it does for the secondary, and how does this secondary even look with bringing a guy back who, again, just 2 years ago was a very important part of this secondary. We'll get to that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is also brought to you by Game Time. GameTime.co is the website. Game Time is the app. Download the app today to buy tickets to all your favorite events without it being stressful. We now know the NFL schedule, which means if you're a Steelers fan, you want to come to Pittsburgh or just go to meet them on the road, this is your best chance to do that with Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you or abroad, wherever you're going. Game Time gives you killer deals, even on last-minute tickets. That gives you a best price guarantee that can't be beat, and you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, and so many different types of events. If you want Christmas Day tickets here in Pittsburgh, the Steelers versus Chiefs, the Game Time's got those. Home opener against the Chargers, they got those. You can also, if you want to go to Atlanta to see the Steelers season opener, you can do that too, all here on the Game Time app that you can download right to your phone right now. Plus, the Game Time best price guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter with Josh Taylor of KDK TV. Josh, I want to reemphasize this to our offense. We took, as you could tell, we're way past our time for where we are. We're still about to do another segment. We're already in 30 minutes, which is usually when we hang up. But I wanted to take a considerable amount of time to take the seriousness of these charges and what happened and the situation around Cam Sutton, so that if you're listening to or watching this show, you have an understanding of what's going on here and why Cam Sutton, is already back in the league. We don't know if the NFL is going to do any other punishment, on him. They might. The NFL, it's their own thing. It has nothing to do with courts. If they deem that he violated the conduct policy, that could lead to a suspension. But I think the Steelers are like, hey, we'll deal with it when we deal with it. But I thought it was interesting that we got to hear from someone else who played with Cam Sutton, and it's crazy to think this because it was just 2 years ago. But the only other player who played in the secondary with Cam Sutton when he was with the Steelers for 6 seasons that's left on the team now is Minkah Fitzpatrick. And as everything would behold it, Minkah Fitzpatrick spoke on the same day that Cam Sutton spoke. Here's Minkah Fitzpatrick from Steelers OTAs when we asked him about Cam Sutton.
You're one of the few players in the secondary who knows knows Cam Sutton. When a player goes through something like that, how important it is to welcome them back and accept them into the locker room?
I think it's extremely important. You know what I'm saying? We all have that stuff that we go through. And I think one of the best things about being in a locker room is that you got 53 or 52 other dudes that can help you get through whatever it is. Cam is a great dude. We all have our flaws and our situations, but we're going to embrace him with open arms and treat him like he never left. You know what I'm saying?
What does he do for you guys back there?
One, he's experienced. You know what I'm saying? He's been in the system for a long time. He's been in the league for a long time. So he adds experience. He's a versatile player. He can play corner. He can play nickel. He can play dime, even safety if he had to. So he adds, another chess piece to the chessboard for us.
Did you keep in touch with him at all when he went to Detroit, and especially this offseason?
Yes, sir.
What were some of those conversations like with him, not only just in the interim kind of between Detroit and here, but last season? I mean, how much were you keeping in touch, and what did you talk about?
It's just keeping up with each other, making sure each other's doing well. But just check-ins, and that's it really.
Are you surprised to see him back here after everything? Do you have an idea this was kind of in the pipeline?
No, I wasn't surprised by it.
Minkah, what's the value of a player like Cam to a defense?
He's a versatile guy. He's an experienced guy. And, that's what he brings.
So, Josh, just talking about what Cam brings on the field, I know that there are some people that are going to look at his numbers in Detroit and be like, well, why would you want that guy? But it's important to remember, too, that Cam Sutton, when he was with the Steelers, he was in a role that was very familiar to him, and a system that was very familiar to him. He's coming back to the same system. He even joked about it being like riding a bike, in later in other parts of that interview. But this is I don't think it's a given that Cam Sutton is going to give up the same plays that he gave up in 2023 with the Detroit Lions. Yes, he gave up 8 touchdowns. Yes, his passer rating allowed was 122 points. That's very bad. Like, you do not want to have that, especially with the money that the Lions were paying him. But if you're the Steelers and you get back the guy that, in his last 2 years with the team, he had multiple interceptions. He had 5 interceptions over the last 2 years he was with the Steelers. If you get back a guy like that who also can help you in the slot while also not being exclusively held to the slot, that can be an asset to the team, especially because we don't know who the slot's going to be. But I also wouldn't rule out the possibility of Cam Sutton playing on the outside for the Steelers, because he did both when he was with the Steelers before. And I think the biggest difference is now you look at Joey Porter Jr. and you're like, that's CB1. He takes away the top dog. Whereas with the Lions, Cam Sutton had to be the top dog. He was the guy. Now Cam Sutton doesn't have to guard Jamar Chase every single play. He doesn't have to guard, Justin Jefferson every play. He can cover the number 2 wide receivers, or he can be covering the slot. And I think that's where his ability to communicate, to work within the defense, to help with the complications that Minkah Fitzpatrick likes to have in his secondary, because they love to communicate, they love to confuse quarterbacks. Those are the things that I do think that Cam Sutton can still bring to the table and be good with the Steelers.
It's been a while, Chris, since I've dropped an obligatory reference to The Wire on the show. So
oh, boy. Here we go.
I'm going to quote Marlo Stanfield here. This sounds like one of them good problems. When you bring back a guy who has that kind of familiarity, like you mentioned, he knows the system. He's worked with Terrell Austin before. He's played with Minkah Fitzpatrick. He knows how Minkah operates, and that's something that you can't discount because it might make Minkah Fitzpatrick's job easier on the back end. And that's something that they're looking for going into this season. But I agree wholeheartedly, and this is something that we can talk about because we've already seen it happen with this secondary just this past season because injuries happen. You can lose guys. If you only have a bunch of guys who do one thing, and then you lose a guy who does one thing and a few of those guys, and you don't have maybe other ones that can do that thing, now you got to scramble around, find people to fill holes and find other pieces. Meanwhile, you got a guy like Cam Sutton who can do more than one thing. So let's say this team loses a Dante Jackson. Let's say Joey Porter goes down for a game or two. Now you can slide Cam Sutton to the outside, and is he a direct replacement? No. But maybe he does, bail out a little bit of water so the ship doesn't take on too much until Joey Porter Jr. comes back or until a Dante Jackson comes back. Or let's say you get into a sub package where you need to move him around and maybe do some other things with him. You have that versatility too. And let's not kid ourselves. Defenses in this current era, you better be versatile. You better have guys that can do more than one thing. You better have guys that can play more than one position or be interchangeable in different circumstances because not only is it harder to keep up with what offenses do because so many offenses do different things, it's also harder to do that in this salary cap era and pay the best guys that you can keep together and pay the most money for the best possible group that you can assemble to do that. So when you find a guy that can do more than one thing, and he has familiarity with your system, and he has history with your defense, and you're getting him at a pretty good price, that's a good problem to have.
Absolutely. And I think not just a pretty good price, the cheapest price you could get him, the vet minimum. Yeah. And it's only for a year.
Price.
Right. And he's 29 years old. He'll be 30 in February. So he still has years before I think this is technically his prime. I actually think that this could be the prime of his career. That the Steelers are getting a guy who again knows their system, works well with the team, and again I can't speak about enough about how again when I say I was surprised that it was Cam Sutton, and it's just there was also the reminder of myself that hey, we talk to these guys as part of their job. We do not know them as people, but as reporters, we do get to see temperament of guys. And Cam Sutton's a guy who, when I was my first time in the Steelers locker room was 2017. It was my first year being able to go into the locker room to talk to players. And Cam Sutton, it was his rookie season. Whenever I asked him, and y'all know I like to get into details and plays and schemes and techniques and things like that. And when I went into it with other guys, they'd be like, "Get out of here, young guy! We don't want to. We're not going to tell you the plays." I'm not asking for the plays. I'm just asking for what happened on this play. And when I asked Cam Sutton those questions, like, "Oh no, yeah, well I flipped in this coverage. We were trying to disguise this," and I was like, "Thank you. Someone wants to work with me." And Cam Sutton, for all 6 of his years that he was with the Steelers before, I had a great relationship with him. He was one of the nicest guys you could talk to. Sometimes, it's very rare that reporters are like, "All right, you're talking too much." Sometimes Cam Sutton will be talking, and we'd be like, "All right, Cam, you can stop," because he just keeps going. But that's why myself and several others like Josh were just surprised to see Cam Sutton, because in the locker room, we would have never guessed that he would be one of those guys. Now, again, that is not to say that he is completely innocent of any wrongdoing in this situation. He might not be. And again, we do just because we talk to somebody in interviews does not mean we know what they do in their private life. But I think that where I'm going to with my personal interactions is that he had a great rapport with everybody in the Steelers locker room. Minkah Fitzpatrick loved having him there, and you heard Minkah Fitzpatrick. They stayed in contact even when he just went to the Lions and was playing there. That is something the Steelers need back as part of their secondary. They have a lot of young guys. Corey Trice is trying to earn a job on the outside. Darius Rush is trying to earn a job on the outside. Beanie Bishop's trying to earn a job in the slot. Dante Jackson's, it was kind of the elder statesman of the room. Now Sutton can come in, help be an elder statesman, and also be a guy that knows the system, so he can be like, hey, Joey Porter Jr., you did great last year, and now we're going to try to set up things that can put you in even better situations to be a turnover creator for this defense. So on the field, I do not see a drawback of signing Cam Sutton. Again, off the field, I do think there's still questions that need to be answered. But those answers will come with time, and I think the Steelers have gotten enough of those answers to get to the part where he's at least on the roster, practicing with the team, and they see what comes from here.
I agree wholeheartedly. For me personally, I can't see a scenario where, and I'll mention Mike Tomlin in this too. You mentioned Minkah Fitzpatrick. I can't see a scenario where Mike Tomlin, who also is notoriously known, and I say notorious for the well-known factor of it all. He's well known for having relationships with his guys even after they leave town. So even for Mike Tomlin, even if he's preserving that relationship with Cam Sutton, for him to possibly want Cam Sutton back and to try to reignite that and keep that going, I think that says a lot about him too, and about what this organization and how they felt about him to want him back. But I'm with you. Outside of the legal ramifications, there's really no downside here. There's no downside to doing this. There are too many people outside of Cam Sutton who stand to benefit from having him there. And that defense as a whole stands to benefit, especially that back end. And it's undergone so much turnover. When the only guy who's played with you is Minkah Fitzpatrick and you were here 2 years ago, that's a lot of turnover in a short period of time. So if you can mitigate that and bring a guy back that limits that turnover, that's really a good position to be in.
Absolutely. There's still going to be a lot to talk about when it comes to Cam Sutton and how it's going to impact the team and what even happens with, an NFL, decision. Will they suspend him? Will they fine him? What will happen from this? All of that stuff you can be kept up with here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We still got a lot to talk about because Minkah did speak, and I wanted to get to what Minkah said, but again, I wanted to spend time focusing on this Cameron Sutton situation because I find it very serious. And Minkah Fitzpatrick did say he wants to get back to playing Minkah ball. What does that mean? We'll discuss that on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Josh, thanks so much for joining us here. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Social media is pretty simple. It's right there below. Josh Taylor HD. That's pretty much on every platform where you can find me. As far as the TV side, kdka.com, cbspittsburgh.com. If you want to watch a live stream, I'll be there later on today, this evening, pretty much the next several days, all through the weekend. You can usually find me on weekends on KDKA TV. Weekend mornings on 93.7 The Fan as well. All of that stuff still going on. Also, I want to do a quick drop here. It was just announced, I think yesterday. 47 years, the story of the 2023-24 Duquesne Dukes. Bob Healy, Dave Finoli, Zach Weiss, really good friends of my colleagues. They're the ones writing it, but yours truly is writing the introduction. And I believe that drops in November. So keep an eye out for that. College basketball fans, local college basketball fans, Duquesne fans, I love you. Be sure to check it out. Yours truly is writing the intro on that. And that will be my 8th book that I'm a part of, published. So imagine that. But yeah, a whole bunch of stuff happening.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. And thank you all for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, thank you for sticking with us for a longer episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Ross, don't kill me for making a long episode. We're back tomorrow here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.